Hello, Jake. I'm going to read through your paper and give you some feedback. For a good amount of educators, standardized tests are a point of contention as we are constantly trying to improve how we test the students. Not only can jobs possibly be on the line, but can cause other problems for students and teachers. After looking through the academic journals and interviewing a former teacher, I found that it's not just the students that dislike the testing, but the teachers as well. However, there may not be a better solution. Oh, I really like, most people haven't done this, but you've really nicely previewed for us the patterns that you found just a little bit so that we can kind of be seeing where they came from. I like that. As students, we're always taught to try our best on all exams because they have an impact, whether or not it impacts the grade. In 11th grade, I spent time in Amy Velasco's class. Not only would we have conversations about calculus, but life and education, providing a very interesting relationship that explored many topics and intricacies of life. I think you need a comma, like, not only do we have conversation about calculus, comma, but, and then maybe, but we also discussed that stuff. I don't know. She no longer works at the school, yet she had mentioned how she was frustrated by standardized testing and was delighted to talk about her experience with standardized testing. Good. When talking about how testing, ooh, this feels like a new paragraph. When talking about how testing impacts students, she said it definitely impacts the students. The word test has such a negative connotation that it becomes difficult for some students to relax once they hear that word. Students are brought from test to test, and the anxiety that is associated with the word never goes away, and she, as a teacher, feels responsible for helping the students deal with the anxieties and provide activities that can help her students. Tim Walker mentions in an article, who's Tim Walker? So I would introduce that with something like Tim Walker in the blah, blah, blah describes this as, or makes the point that, something like that, teachers learn during their training and through experience that each child's readiness to learn new skills and concepts varies by many factors in addition to age. Each student is different and requires a different amount of help or teaching, and also a different type, I would add, of help or teaching. These exams assume that all students are the same, and the only thing different is the information they have learned. I guess so. Students should be treated as individuals, and these tests don't provide that. Well, I mean, you know I'm on your side here, but they do test students individually, and they do get individual results. So I feel like you need to explain a little bit better, like, why the test results on a test are not a good indicator of what an individual student is learning or where they are. Some teachers truly understand. Seems like a new paragraph again. Some teachers truly understand the impact of classroom diversity. Excuse me, and some even attempt to talk with other teachers to avoid giving multiple tests in the same day. Mrs. Velasco, yeah, everywhere I've taught, that's been the case. Mrs. Velasco had mentioned this to me when I was in her class, and it's a small detail that made all the difference to me and my classmates, stating, it's a little tedious at times, especially near breaks, and it doesn't always work, but when it does, it makes my students much less stressed, and they're not constantly worrying how they'll study for multiple tests on the same day. She and the other teachers attempt to make students' lives easier by communicating to reduce the amount of work on a given day, but standardized testing is a large test that teachers just have to hope their students take as seriously as normal tests that impact their grades. I mean, why do teachers have to hope that? I don't feel like you've really explained that yet. Or what kind of standardized tests you're particularly talking about to split out into, like, AP exams, SAT, ACT, and then state tests, district tests. So I'd like to hear a little bit about that. This leads to standardized testing proving to be even more frustrating for teachers instead of the students. I'm a little confused there. This leads to standardized testing proving to be even more frustrating for teachers than students, maybe? I'm not quite sure what you meant there. Not only does testing create panic for students, but standardized testing creates even more chaos within teachers. Agree. In the article about standardized testing, you don't need to say authors. You can just say Stephanie and Shelton. Tamara Brooks mentioned that, quote, our school's emphasis on testing data and student scores have shaped our decisions as teachers. Some teachers are required to make their decisions in their classrooms about testing rather than what would be most enjoyable and most beneficial to children. They're forced to make decisions between information they want to teach and information they have to teach, where sometimes they are able to overlap. Okay, so some teachers are required. I think it'd be really good if you had an example here to show what you mean. What decisions in the classroom might be made based on testing. because when you say they're always forced to make decisions between information they want to teach and information they have to teach, I mean, that's true of teachers, even in who are given a lot of room to make their own decisions. That they're still thinking about what students really need to know, and they're also thinking about what they really want them to know, like kind of on a personal level, which sometimes Shelton Brooks also had mentioned, maybe stated. Mentioning makes it seem like it's kind of to the side. The joy and excitement, bird activity at my house. The joy and excitement that had motivated the students and me quickly evaporated in the haze of testing fatigue. That's a nice quote. Since you already said Shelton Brooks, you don't need to put their name there again. You can just have the number. Not only are the students fatigued from sitting and taking a test for hours, but the teachers are worried about the pressure put on them based on their students' test scores. Some teachers are also, a new paragraph somewhere here, right? Probably a new paragraph with not only are students fatigued. Some teachers are also worried because their job could possibly be in jeopardy. Mrs. Velasco mentioned this by saying, seems like a new sentence there, possibly be in jeopardy, period. Mrs. Velasco mentioned this by saying, I have some colleagues here that do have to worry about standardized testing scores, and the school district here expects to figure out quickly how to teach well and learn from your mistakes. If the teacher can't do that, the chances of the teacher is welcome back are very slim. She also mentioned the teachers are evaluated on more than just test scores afterwards. They're evaluated on more than just after what? However, it may be a very unusual case, but a relatively wealthy suburban school would be harder to start in than an urban or rural school, not because of the students themselves, but because of expectations put onto the teachers by administration. So do you mean it's harder if you're at a suburban school because there's more pressure on you to get the good test scores? Because the administration won't put as much pressure on you as a teacher? I mean, I don't know if that might be true, but I don't feel like you quite explained it clearly there. These tests create situations where a teacher is constantly worried about their job status, and that can negatively affect their teaching ability, making the students suffer the most. And I would just add, like, as someone who's been an urban teacher, when I taught in New York City, there was, in all kinds of schools, there was a lot of stress and fighting about if student test scores should impact whether teachers got to keep whether teachers will be fired. Let me put it that way. Especially teachers who teach subjects that are not tested at all, like all of our PE teachers and our Spanish teachers and art teachers and all that stuff. Like, they would end up, part of their evaluation would be how kids did on a test that was just like, had very little to do with what they taught at all, because the state won't pay to test for everything. Anyway, ultimately we should be doing what is best. When you start with ultimately, it tells me it sounds like a new paragraph. Ultimately, we should be doing what is best for students, but we should also take into consideration what helps the teachers and the ability to do their jobs effectively. In fact, according to a survey done in 2015, 70% of educators believe standardized testing is developmentally inappropriate. Yeah, they're right. While it's easy to say that we should get rid of standardized testing, we should be asking what's the solution to this problem. However, there may not be one. While some educators and students can agree that standardized testing is not the best solution, it may be the only solution we have at this time. I mean, I love the angle that you're taking about, like, choosing the best, better of two evils, or whatever that saying is. I love that argument. You're definitely the first person to make that argument, and I think it's a very mature kind of argument. Any solution that may be better would take time to create and mold in order to be more efficient than standardized testing, which may take years to even see an innovative method take place. So are you talking about we need a solution? What problem do we need a solution to? That's really my main question about all of this. Like, is the problem that we don't know how much students are learning? Is the problem that we don't know how to evaluate teachers? Is the problem that the state wants accountability for how they spend their money? Because those different problems would probably have different solutions, right? But I think the only problem you've really talked about, I could be wrong, is the problem of, like, teachers being stressed and students being bored. And I mean, honestly, if I step back, I'm like, students are going to be bored and teachers are going to be stressed regardless of what happens at school. Wow, that went to a dark place. Okay, well, at the front end, this would likely be more expensive. Yeah, I'm not sure what you're saying would be more expensive, as each state would need to spend money to receive the same test for the given amount of students, but it would also take out any question of the material not being the same for each student. So again, I know it's hard to write about these things when you are just beginning in your in your field. But as you're writing this, I'm thinking like, well, one solution to this problem is just to not administer standardized tests at all at the state level. That's what happened when I was in school. States didn't do that, period. So when you're talking about what would be more expensive, I mean, with education being controlled by the states, each state can focus however much attention on education as they please. Ooh, creating a divide between the information not being the same in Minnesota as Mississippi. Okay, again, I know too much about this. So I would not say the difference between Minnesota and Mississippi is a divide between the information, but it's much more so the fact that Mississippi is so desperately poor as a state that they do not have the funds to give as much like time in education and as many resources to education, period, as Minnesota does. Anyway, according to the website, 41 states and 4 territories have adopted Common Core standards, which is an effort to make each state's curriculum the same. Oh, good. That's a good place to look at this. However, for the time being, Mrs. Velasco mentioned that unfortunately there isn't really a system that's more cost-effective and timely than standardized testing, or at least if there is, I haven't heard about it. Okay, I love how you're blending in your interview again. It's extremely time efficient to sit everyone down in the same period of time when a couple proctors are able to make sure everything is going smoothly, instead of individual students being tested or a student taking a test on a computer, which could question the honesty of the test. How would that question the honesty of the test? So another thing I'll throw out, because again, I know you're new to the field, is that standardized tests you can take by computer usually are more accurate, because they will change the questions that they give you based on how many you get right. You know, if you get it right, they'll give you a harder question. If you get it wrong, they'll give you an easier question, versus ones that you just take on paper. What else do I want to say about that? More accurate, like student by student, but also they don't give you quite as good a data on how to compare students because people answer different questions, right? So there's like pluses and minuses to the computer ones where the computer changes the questions and ones where it doesn't. 45 states spent a combined $41.7 billion to help make these tests as successful as they can be. According to a test done by the Brown Center, I determined they have spent. Okay, again, I'm going to say, how are we defining success? You know, who wants this information? Why do they want this information? Why do they think this is the best way to get it? What is the problem they're trying to solve? Because sometimes I think the problem they're trying to solve is testing companies make a lot of money writing tests and selling them to states. When thinking about government spending, this is extremely low. Jeez, it is. $669 million? Okay. I'm confused. So low, some have suggested we scrap the standardized testing and work toward a test that's congruent with the new Common Core standards. Most state tests, from my understanding, are congruent with new Common Core standards. Many have become so. Kansas and Missouri, I believe, have. While government spending can be an ongoing debate, the cost efficiency and time efficiency of standardized testing makes it extremely difficult to challenge. Oh yeah, I don't think it does. As I said, like, you have to step back and say, what problem are we trying to solve? We don't just do standardized testing because there's some inherent good in it. It has to be the solution to some problem. After completing research, talking to a former teacher, and reading articles on what is the best solution, it looks like we currently don't have the best solution available, just one that will work until we're able to find a better one. Once every state adopts a common curriculum, it'll put us in the right direction to have a solution that's better for everyone, teachers, administration, and more importantly, the students. Okay. Education is something that can always be improved upon, yes, and it's our responsibility to speak up when something is satisfactory, yes. Some have spoken about their disagreement with standardized testing, and after discussing the perspectives of students and teachers and determining if it's the best option, we're on our way to improving it for those to come. For future students, maybe. We must continue to fight for education for future generations to have better opportunities than we had and pave the way for them to succeed. Okay, so you had a lot of good stuff here, I would just say that what I'd like to see through here is you defining the problem that you see and the solution that standardized testing is trying to provide for that problem. And then I think you can kind of like tune up and make all of your papers stronger. Email me if you have questions.